Humanity reached the stars with hope in their hearts and fire in their machines. Their ships were not the most beautiful, and their technology was not the most refined, but humans carried something rare, ambition mixed with courage. They explored systems others ignored, mined dangerous worlds, and pushed into regions marked forbidden by ancient treaties. To humans, space was not sacred or terrifying. It was a challenge waiting to be solved. At first, the galactic civilizations watched with curiosity. Humans were young compared to the ancient species who ruled the stars. They moved fast, asked too many questions, and refused to stay in their assigned zones. Their colonies appeared on harsh planets where no one else wished to live, and somehow they survived. This adaptability impressed some observers, but worried many others. Incidents soon followed. Human miners clashed with alien patrols over resources. Human traders ignored long-established protocols. Human soldiers reacted aggressively when threatened, even against forces older and supposedly wiser. To the galactic elite, humans seemed unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous. They did not move slowly like ancient empires. They moved like a storm. Reports reached the Galactic Council, a massive assembly of species that had controlled interstellar law for thousands of years. The council chambers filled with voices calling humanity a risk to galactic stability. Some claimed humans would start wars they could not finish. Others warned that human innovation was growing too fast to control. Fear disguised itself as wisdom, and caution became an excuse for power. Human representatives were summoned to stand before the council. They arrived wearing simple uniforms, carrying no weapons, and speaking honestly. They argued that humanity only wanted a fair place among the stars. They admitted mistakes, but asked for guidance rather than punishment. Their words were sincere, but sincerity had little value in a room ruled by ancient pride. Behind closed discussions, the decision was already made. Humanity was too young, too bold, and too difficult to manage. The council feared what humans might become if allowed to grow freely. Instead of cooperation, they chose containment. Instead of guidance, they chose exile. The judgment was delivered coldly. Humanity was declared a disruptive species. All human territories beyond their home system were revoked. Trade routes were closed, alliances dissolved, and military forces were ordered to escort human ships back to their origin. Any resistance would be met with overwhelming force. The decision was final and unquestionable. Across human colonies, confusion turned into anger and despair. Families were forced to abandon homes they had built with their own hands. Research stations were shut down overnight. Entire worlds were left empty as fleets of humans retreated under watchful alien eyes. Some cried, some shouted, and some stayed silent, burning the moment into memory. The final act of the judgment was silence. The council placed a monitoring barrier around human space, cutting off communication and travel. Humanity was locked inside its own system. Observed but ignored, allowed to exist but never to participate. To the galaxy, humans were now a closed chapter, a problem solved. But within human space, something else was forming. The exile did not break humanity as the council expected. It changed them. The humiliation, the loss, and the injustice planted a deep memory that would be carried by every generation. Humans remembered who judged them, who feared them, and who decided their future without consent. As the last alien ships departed and the stars grew quiet, humanity stood alone. Not defeated, not destroyed, but wounded and watching. The judgment of the stars was meant to end humanity's story. Instead, it became the beginning of something far more dangerous, a civilization with nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. When the last alien ships disappeared and the stars fell silent, humanity faced a future they had never prepared for. The exile had cut them off from galactic trade, shared knowledge, and protection. Suddenly, resources that once flowed easily became rare. Entire supply chains collapsed, and many colonies realized they could not survive on what they had alone. In the early years, life became brutally hard. Food shortages spread across worlds that depended on off-world imports. Energy grids failed without alien components. Medical technologies stopped working when replacement parts ran out. People who had once lived with comfort now stood in long lines for basic survival. Governments struggled to keep order as fear and uncertainty grew. Some colonies did not survive at all. Isolated outposts were abandoned. Their populations evacuated or lost to starvation and environmental collapse. Ships meant for exploration were repurposed to rescue stranded citizens. Every decision became a choice between saving lives and sacrificing dreams. Humanity was forced to shrink before it could grow again. Anger burned across human space. Many blamed the Galactic Council, while others blamed human leaders for pushing too far too fast. Protests turned into riots on several worlds, and old political systems cracked under the pressure. The idea of a united humanity was tested like never before, and for a time, it seemed as if humans might destroy themselves without any alien help. But survival has a way of changing priorities. Slowly, people began to adapt. Scientists who once relied on shared alien databases were forced to rediscover knowledge on their own. Engineers learned to rebuild complex machines using only human-made materials. Farmers experimented with new crops suited to harsh environments. Failure was common, but every failure taught a lesson. Human industries transformed. Without alien standards to follow, innovation became wild and experimental. Ships were redesigned for durability instead of elegance. Weapons became simpler but more reliable. Artificial intelligence systems were rebuilt from the ground up, designed to think like humans rather than imitate alien logic. Progress was slower, but it was truly their own. Education changed as well. Children grew up learning not only history and science, but also survival, cooperation, and responsibility. The story of exile became part of daily life, taught not with hatred, but with truth. Humanity learned that dependence had made them weak, and self-reliance was now the only path forward. Communities grew closer. Worlds that once competed began sharing what little they had. Trade routes reopened within human space, and a new sense of unity formed. Not driven by politics or profit, but by shared struggle. Humans discovered strength in cooperation when survival depended on it. Military forces were also reshaped. No longer built to impress alien allies, human defenses focused on protection, strategy, and flexibility. Every ship, every soldier, and every system was designed with one thought in mind: never be helpless again. Training emphasized creativity and adaptability over rigid command structures. Years passed, and the worst days slowly faded. Humanity was poorer, smaller, and scarred, but it was no longer broken. The pain of exile had burned away arrogance and replaced it with determination. People stopped asking when the galaxy would accept them again, and started asking how humanity could stand on its own. By the end of this dark chapter, humanity had changed at its core. The loss had forged resilience, the struggle had built unity, and the isolation had awakened a dangerous idea. That maybe humanity did not need the galaxy at all. Maybe being abandoned was not the end, but the beginning of something stronger, something the stars would one day be forced to notice. The galaxy slowly forgot about humanity. After the exile, no ships crossed human borders, no signals answered from their space, and no messages reached the wider stars. To the ancient empires, silence meant failure. They believed humans had collapsed under isolation, destroyed by their own weakness, and erased by time. Galactic records marked human territory as inactive. Star maps dimmed their systems into unimportant shadows. Scholars wrote that humanity was a brief experiment that ended in disaster. Young species were warned not to follow the same reckless path. Humanity became a lesson, not a threat. But the silence was not emptiness. Inside their sealed space, humans were very much alive. They stopped sending signals not because they were dead, but because they no longer cared to be heard. Every ounce of energy was focused inward, on survival, rebuilding, and growth. Without outside eyes watching, humanity worked in secret. Old technologies were stripped apart and redesigned. Engineers questioned ideas once considered perfect because they came from alien minds. Nothing was sacred anymore. Every system was tested, broken, and rebuilt stronger. Time moved differently in isolation. Decades passed without distraction, and progress became steady and deep. Humans no longer chased fast expansion. They chased understanding. Scientists studied physics the galaxy had ignored because it was too unstable or too dangerous. Humans accepted risk because they had nothing left to lose. Artificial intelligence evolved in strange ways. No longer shaped by alien rules, human AIs became partners rather than tools. They learned creativity, emotional logic, and unconventional problem solving. Together, humans and machines solved challenges once thought impossible. Ship design also changed. Human vessels were no longer built to impress councils or match galactic standards. They were built to survive anything. Hulls grew thicker, engines became adaptable, and systems were designed to keep functioning even when partially destroyed. These ships looked crude from the outside, but inside, they were masterpieces of efficiency. The military trained in silence as well, not for conquest, but for preparedness. Simulations imagined enemies stronger, faster, and more advanced than anything humans had seen. Every loss in training was studied carefully. Humans learned that perfection was impossible, but improvement never ended. Culturally, humanity transformed. Stories of exile were no longer told with anger, but with calm understanding. Children learned that the galaxy feared humans not because they were evil, but because they were different. This belief shaped a generation that valued patience, control, and quiet confidence. Humanity became disciplined. Emotion was no longer allowed to rule decisions, but compassion was never lost. Care for one another became sacred, because in isolation, every life mattered, every death was felt deeply, and every success was shared. Centuries passed, unnoticed by the galaxy, while alien empires fought each other over borders and pride. Humanity watched, learned, and waited. They studied intercepted signals, analyzed alien tactics, and mapped galactic politics from afar. Silence became their greatest weapon. The galaxy assumed humans were stagnant, but they were evolving faster than ever. Freed from galactic influence, humans followed paths no other species dared to walk. They blended biology and machinery, redefined energy limits, and challenged the laws others accepted without question. The silence also taught humans restraint. They learned when not to act, when not to speak, and when patience achieved more than force. This lesson became part of their identity. Power meant nothing if used carelessly. By the time the galaxy fully forgot about humanity, humans were no longer the species that had been banished. They were something new, shaped by time, hardship, and quiet determination. The long silence was not a pause. It was preparation. And somewhere deep within human space, systems came online one by one. Ships powered up without announcement, and signals were prepared but not yet sent. Humanity was silent by choice now. And when that silence finally ended, the galaxy would realize it had mistaken quiet for weakness. Life in isolation shaped humanity in ways no one had predicted. The generations born after the exile did not remember the open galaxy or alien cities. They grew up knowing only human worlds, hard lessons, and quiet determination. For them, survival was not a temporary struggle. It was a way of life. Children were taught early that comfort was fragile. Schools focused on problem solving, adaptability, and cooperation. Every child learned basic engineering, emergency medicine, and survival skills. Failure was not punished, it was studied, because every mistake carried a lesson that could save lives in the future. Human culture slowly changed. Pride became quieter, less about showing power and more about earning respect through action. Heroes were no longer conquerors or famous leaders. They were builders, scientists, pilots, and teachers. People who solved problems and protected others were admired more than those who spoke loudly. Technology advanced alongside this cultural shift. Humans stopped copying old designs and began creating systems shaped by hardship. Energy systems were built to function even when damaged. Cities were designed with redundancy so no single failure could destroy them. Every structure carried the memory of past loss. Biology also became a focus. Humans adapted their bodies to survive harsh environments. Through controlled evolution and careful modification, they became stronger, more resilient, and better suited for long-term space life. These changes were not about becoming monsters, but about enduring where others could not. Human medicine evolved rapidly. Doctors learned to work with limited supplies, developing treatments that relied on understanding the body rather than expensive tools. Life expectancy increased despite difficult conditions, proving that strength came from knowledge, not luxury. The military transformed as well. Training emphasized thinking over firepower. Soldiers were taught to fight outnumbered, cut off, and under pressure. Command structures became flexible, allowing decisions to be made quickly without waiting for orders. This created forces that could adapt faster than any rigid empire. Strategy became a form of art. Humans studied probability, psychology, and chaos. Learning how enemies thought became just as important as knowing their weapons. Every battle simulation focused on turning weakness into advantage. This mindset spread beyond the military and into daily life. Emotionally, humanity matured. Loss was common, But despair was not allowed to rule. People learned to grieve, then continue. Communities supported each other deeply because isolation taught them a simple truth: survival was shared, or it did not happen at all. Trust became precious. Lies and corruption were punished harshly. Not because of morality alone, but because betrayal endangered everyone. This created societies built on responsibility and accountability, where every role mattered. Generations passed, and with them, fear of the galaxy faded. Humans stopped seeing themselves as victims. They saw themselves as survivors, shaped by trial rather than broken by it. The exile became history, not trauma. Innovation accelerated. Human scientists pushed beyond accepted limits. They explored unstable energy, experimental physics, and dangerous ideas the galaxy had forbidden, because humanity had learned that safety was often an illusion. Progress required courage. Through hardship, humanity refined itself. Stronger bodies, sharper minds, disciplined emotions, and united purpose formed a civilization hardened by reality. They did not seek conflict, but they no longer feared it. By the end of this transformation, humanity had evolved beyond its former self, not just technologically, but mentally and culturally. They were no longer the reckless newcomers the galaxy had judged. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had survived everything thrown at it and learned from every wound. The first sign of change appeared far beyond human space, where ancient sensors floated quietly between stars. For centuries, these machines had detected nothing unusual, only the normal noise of the galaxy. Then one day, something impossible appeared. A signal, steady, controlled, and unmistakably artificial, coming from a region long believed to be silent forever. At first, it was dismissed as a malfunction. Technicians recalibrated instruments, scientists checked old data, and officials assumed the readings would fade. But the signal did not disappear. It grew stronger, repeating in perfect intervals, carrying complex patterns no natural phenomenon could create. Soon, multiple empires confirmed the same reading. The source was clear: human space. Panic spread quietly through command centers and research worlds. Humanity was not supposed to exist anymore. They were meant to be broken, forgotten, and irrelevant. Yet the signal proved otherwise. As analysts studied the transmission, fear deepened. The message was not a cry for help. There was no distress, no weakness, no desperation. The signal was calm, precise, and confident. It carried advanced mathematical structures that surpassed current galactic standards. This was not a civilization begging to be noticed. It was one announcing its presence. Then the ships appeared. At the edge of known space, human vessels emerged from controlled distortions in space itself. Their design shocked observers. They did not follow known engineering styles. Their hulls were dark, layered, and scarred, built for function, not beauty. They moved with terrifying efficiency, ignoring the limits most species accepted as absolute. No weapons were fired. No threats were spoken. The ships simply held position, watching, waiting. Their sensors scanned entire systems in moments, mapping defenses, energy flows, and communication networks with ease. It was clear these ships were not explorers. They were proof of capability. Galactic leaders argued in emergency meetings. Some demanded immediate military response. Others urged caution, remembering how humans had once reacted to pressure. The old judgment echoed through their minds. Had exile been a mistake? The human signal changed. Now it carried a simple message, clear and impossible to misinterpret. Humanity had returned. They did not request permission. They did not demand surrender. The message was informational, almost polite, as if speaking to equals. Fear spread among the populations of ancient empires. Civilians remembered stories passed down as warnings about a species that adapted too fast and refused to bow. Now that species stood at the door of the galaxy, stronger than ever. Military tests were conducted in secret. Human ships were observed performing maneuvers no known fleet could match. Simulated engagements showed devastating outcomes for traditional formations. Defensive systems failed to track human movement accurately. Old strategies collapsed under new rules. Yet, despite their overwhelming advantage, humans remained restrained. They did not advance deeper. They did not attack. They waited. This restraint confused the galaxy more than aggression ever could. It showed discipline, control, and confidence. Within human space, the return was carefully planned. Every action measured, every signal timed. Humanity understood that fear could trigger disaster. They did not want chaos. They wanted recognition. The silence that followed the first contact was heavy. The galaxy realized something had changed forever. Humanity was no longer the reckless species of the past. They were organized, patient, and undeniably powerful. The return signal was not an act of war. It was a statement of survival. After centuries of exile and silence, humanity had stepped back onto the galactic stage, not as exiles, not as victims, but as a force the stars could no longer ignore. The sudden reappearance of humanity threw the galaxy into chaos. Command centers across multiple empires buzzed with alarms. Analysts pored over every detail of the human fleet, trying to understand their intentions. Every observation pointed to a terrifying truth. These humans were not the weakened, scattered people once judged and banished. They were stronger, smarter, and faster than anyone had predicted. Old fears resurfaced. Stories of human unpredictability and aggression, once dismissed as myths or warnings, now seemed dangerously real. Generals argued over how to respond. Philosophers debated whether this was a species returning to claim vengeance or simply reclaiming its place. The uncertainty spread like wildfire because humans did not behave according to any known pattern. Military fleets scrambled. Defensive grids were activated across borders. Interceptors and reconnaissance ships were dispatched at record speeds. But every test, every engagement in simulations failed to anticipate human strategy. Their vessels moved with fluid precision, anticipating maneuvers before they happened. The galaxy's oldest and most experienced commanders found themselves outmatched in every scenario. Intelligence reports detailed new human technologies, unknown energy shields, adaptive propulsion, and stealth systems capable of evading detection for weeks. Weapons could strike with unparalleled accuracy, and logistical systems allowed humans to sustain long campaigns without supply lines. Every new report added layers to the growing fear. Humanity had prepared for centuries, silently, and no empire had seen it coming. Diplomats tried to act, sending messages through back channels, hoping to open dialogue before panic became war. But humans responded calmly, formally, and without emotion. Their tone neither threatening nor apologetic. They seemed to be demonstrating control, showing that they were capable of destruction, but unwilling to use it recklessly. This level of restraint only deepened the unease, because it suggested strategic thinking far beyond any other species. Galactic leaders realized their assumptions about humanity had been catastrophically wrong. They had expected fear, chaos, or collapse. Instead, they faced a species that had endured exile, mastered survival, and emerged more disciplined than anyone else. Entire political systems questioned themselves. Old alliances wavered, and some smaller empires even considered surrendering preemptively. The fear spread to ordinary citizens as news traveled, markets halted, factories slowed, and public debates erupted about what to do. Parents told children stories about humans, once cautionary tales, now terrifying reminders of what could happen if underestimated. The entire galaxy, rich with countless civilizations, suddenly felt fragile before a single species. Analysis of human ships continued, revealing that every vessel was capable of independent operation, yet connected through instantaneous communication and coordinated decision-making. Traditional command hierarchies appeared inefficient in comparison. Leaders realized that human adaptability could overcome even the largest fleets in prolonged conflict, and any underestimation could be fatal. Some of the older empires began secret talks, forming coalitions that had been unthinkable for centuries. They hoped that combined strength might match the humans, but as more intelligence came in, doubts grew. The humans had anticipated nearly every scenario. Their fleet sizes, technology, and tactics were designed to counter overwhelming opposition. If humanity chose to fight, the galaxy could be changed forever. Amid the panic, political advisors cautioned restraint, suggesting observation and diplomacy instead of aggression. But fear made coordination nearly impossible. Each empire acted independently, trying to position forces preemptively, and yet every effort seemed inadequate. Humanity's restraint contrasted with the galaxy's growing hysteria, demonstrating confidence and patience in a way no species could imitate. For the first time in galactic history, a single species commanded attention not through conquest, but through preparation, unity, and precision. Humans had turned their exile into a weapon, not of war, but of expectation. Every empire realized that the humans were no longer a minor nuisance. They were now the standard against which strategy, technology, and discipline would be measured. In this new reality, fear became respect, and uncertainty became awe. The galaxy understood that humanity's return was not just a reappearance, it was a reckoning, not through violence yet, but through undeniable presence. Power and control had shifted silently while no one was watching, and the ancient empires, once certain of their superiority, now faced the chilling truth. Humanity could not be contained, underestimated, or ignored. Humanity's envoys arrived at the Galactic Council with quiet confidence, their ships gliding into the massive chamber without fanfare or aggression. Leaders of countless species stared in disbelief, expecting anger, revenge, or pleading. Instead, they found humans composed, respectful, and calculated. Their presence alone spoke volumes about discipline and control. The humans spoke clearly, their voices calm, projecting authority without arrogance. They reminded the Council of the centuries of exile, the struggles endured, and the innovations achieved in isolation. Every word was precise, avoiding blame yet carrying undeniable weight. It was not a demand for mercy, nor an apology, but a statement of existence and capability. They explained that humanity had not returned to dominate or destroy, but to reclaim its rightful place among the stars. They emphasized self-reliance, discipline, and respect for strength, showing that exile had taught lessons no council could impose. The words carried a quiet power because they were backed by centuries of preparation and fleets capable of enforcing them if necessary. The council members felt a mix of relief and terror. Relief because humanity showed no intent of immediate war. Terror because it was clear that restraint did not mean weakness. Every gesture, every statement was calculated, demonstrating strategic thinking far beyond most species. The humans had mastered patience as a weapon, patience as influence, and patience as a form of power. They spoke of cooperation, not submission, offering knowledge, trade, and alliances on equal terms. But they demanded recognition, equality, and respect. Anything less would be unacceptable, because humanity had learned that compromise with fear or condescension led to vulnerability. And vulnerability had once cost them their place in the galaxy. The Council struggled to respond. Decades of tradition, protocol, and authority suddenly seemed meaningless in the face of human presence. Advisors whispered warnings, generals argued for caution, and politicians debated the risk of outright denial. But the humans did not rush, did not threaten. They stood firm, their confidence forcing the Council to consider a new reality. Some species reacted with fear, recalling stories of human unpredictability and aggression. Others were awed by their ingenuity, endurance, and calm reasoning. The conversation shifted from threats to possibilities, from panic to strategy. Humanity had taken the first step, and the galaxy had no choice but to listen. Every human envoy seemed to radiate a quiet intensity, not from pride, but from certainty. They had endured exile, survived isolation, and built strength in ways no empire had imagined. Their presence proved that survival could be transformed into mastery, and mastery could be wielded without violence if desired. The Council realized that the old hierarchy of the galaxy was changing. Human logic, discipline, and adaptability forced a reconsideration of laws, borders, and influence. Species that had once dismissed humans as reckless now understood that underestimation could be catastrophic. Decisions would have to be made with care, or centuries of control could unravel. The humans concluded their address, leaving no room for misunderstanding. They did not issue ultimatums, but every word implied consequence. The Council had witnessed the culmination of centuries of exile, struggle, and evolution, and understood that humanity's return was not temporary or symbolic. It was permanent, transformative, and irreversible. As they departed, silence filled the chamber. Leaders and delegates exchanged uncertain glances, understanding that the galaxy had shifted beneath their feet. Humanity had returned not as a conquered or pleading people, but as equals, disciplined and prepared, ready to claim a place that was once denied. The message was clear. Humanity did not seek revenge, but it demanded recognition. This balance of power, restraint, and preparedness stunned the Council. For the first time, a species had been wronged, punished, and underestimated, and had returned stronger, wiser, and more controlled than any of its critics could imagine. In that moment, the galaxy realized a profound truth. The humans who had once been exiled were no longer defined by fear, weakness, or exile. They were defined by endurance, intelligence, and quiet authority. And every empire understood, even if reluctantly, that the story of humanity was no longer written by exile or judgment, but by their own hands. The galaxy could no longer ignore humanity. The once exiled species now stood as a central force, reshaping the balance of power. Ancient empires realized that years of judgment, fear, and dismissal had underestimated not only human skill, but human determination. Humanity had returned with a quiet authority that no weapon or fleet could match. Planets across multiple systems buzzed with activity. Political leaders scrambled to understand how to engage with a species that demanded equality without arrogance. Humans did not seek conquest, yet every gesture implied consequence. Their presence forced every empire to rethink strategy, law, and diplomacy. The old order of the stars was shifting, and no one could stop it. Humanity's fleets moved with purpose, not aggression. They secured borders, monitored key systems, and rebuilt trade networks within their space. Every action reinforced one idea. Humans were capable, organized, and patient. Their restraint was as powerful as any fleet, and it earned respect even from the most skeptical species. Within human society, the return to the galaxy sparked celebration and reflection. Centuries of hardship, loss, and isolation had forged unity, resilience, and innovation. Citizens understood that their exile had been a cruel lesson, but it had also given them an unmatched strength. Every accomplishment in science, engineering, and culture became a testament to endurance. Meanwhile, alien species observed with a mixture of awe and caution. Some sought alliances, eager to benefit from human knowledge and technology. Others plotted defenses, wary of future conflicts. Every empire, large or small, had to consider the possibility that humanity could not be contained, underestimated, or ignored. The rules of interstellar interaction had changed permanently. The humans themselves remained focused and disciplined. They did not celebrate dominance or fear. They continued to refine systems, train fleets, and advance technology. Every generation understood that patience was a weapon, preparation a shield, and unity a strength. The lessons of exile remained alive in every decision, shaping strategy and culture alike. Trade and diplomacy flourished, but on humanity's terms, they offered knowledge, resources, and collaboration. Yet every agreement required respect and equality. No empire could take advantage of them without consequence. Humanity had learned the cost of weakness, and they would never repeat it. Their return was as much about teaching restraint and fairness as it was about survival. Stories of exile and triumph spread across the stars, teaching other civilizations that judgment, fear, and arrogance could miscalculate even the smallest species. Humanity had proven that isolation could strengthen rather than destroy, that suffering could refine rather than weaken, and that a species once underestimated could become the standard by which others measured themselves. The galaxy slowly adapted. Borders were redrawn, treaties rewritten, and hierarchies reconsidered. Alien species learned to treat humans not as unpredictable threats, but as disciplined partners, equally capable and equally cautious. Respect became the language of interaction, because the alternative, underestimation, was too dangerous. Humanity's return marked a turning point in galactic history. No longer exiles, no longer victims. They were now architects of their destiny. Every system, every fleet, every innovation was a reminder that hardship could produce greatness. The species once banished had become a defining force, not through conquest or revenge, but through endurance, intelligence, and quiet authority. And in every human mind, a lesson remained clear. The exile had been painful, but it had been necessary. It had forced humanity to grow beyond survival, to master patience, strategy, and unity. The galaxy had faced a species it tried to control and failed. Now it faced a species that had learned to control itself, and in doing so, had become unstoppable. The stars had judged humanity, and in that judgment had unknowingly prepared them for the ultimate return. The exiled had become the architects of the future, their place among the stars secure. Their story was no longer one of weakness, but of triumph, endurance, and transformation. Humanity had returned, not to ask, but to claim, not to beg, but to stand, and the galaxy would never be the same again.